What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my first impressions for The Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remastered, a game that I was extremely excited to see was real. Following its official announcement and shadow drop on Tuesday, I've had the opportunity to play it, of course, and just as a note, I am recording this on Tuesday, but it's probably going to go up either Wednesday or Thursday, so I'm already a little bit ahead of wherever this video is, and I do plan on fully reviewing it and taking a look at everything it has to offer. But before I get into this video too far, it's probably important to mention that Bethesda did offer me a review key following the announcement of the game, like right as it shadow dropped. They emailed me not long after that, and the funny thing is, in the short time it took them to email me, I had already bought it, so I didn't need one. With that out of the way, the main sort of takeaway that I have from my initial impressions of the remastered version here is just that they really did manage to actually capture the feeling of Oblivion, which I was a little concerned about, but like a lot of that sort of old school charm, that jank that everybody sees, the weird stuff the Radiant AI does, it's all there. It's very peak Oblivion, and if anything, I'm actually really surprised that it works, because in order to achieve some of the graphical improvements that they've made, they've sort of Frankenstein-monstered the game's original engine with Unreal Engine 5. So the original engine acts as the sort of part of the game that is handling all of the logic, the AI, the behaviors, which is why all that stuff works, and then the Unreal Engine 5 side is handling everything else to make it look the way it does. And to be honest, I'm just kind of surprised it works as well as it does, because visually, I think this game looks great. It admittedly does lean a little on the Elder Scrolls Online side of graphics, to be honest, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think the Argonians and the Khajiit look much better than they did previously, and to top even that off, while they did visually improve all of the characters, they did also kind of keep their weird, odd faces that Oblivion is really known for, which is a remarkable sort of middle ground to be able to hit there. The more immediately obvious stuff out of the way, if you dig a little deeper, systems-wise, it's interesting as well, because some of the biggest things this remaster tackles were redoing the level system, adjusting the level scaling, and fleshing out other systems, like, for instance, the voice acting. So on the voice acting front, I actually, in a video just before the announcement, managed to call this almost perfectly, which is that what they did was keep the iconic voice lines that everybody remembers of the really notable characters, and then what they actually did is recorded new voice lines to add new voice actors for the various races and stuff, so each of them sounds differently, which means you get a wider variety of voice acting for the same content, and because of the way they handled that, you can't really notice it in the sense that all of the big quests and iconic characters are still using the same stuff, which I thought was great. Now, the character and leveling stuff is a little more complicated, so I did want to mention that right at character creation, for each individual race, you can now pick an origin. This will adjust your racial stats for that class, which honestly I just thought was a really neat touch. But when you actually get to the class part of things, you can still create a custom class, pick your birth sign, all the usual stuff, but where it gets interesting, though, is what they did with classes and whatnot. So the simplest way to describe it is probably that they sort of smashed together Oblivion and Skyrim's systems. So everything you do skill-wise will contribute to your level ups. When you level up, you are assigned 12 virtues. You can then assign these 12 virtues to 3 different stats in whatever manner you please, which means you can put up to 5 points, which is the max in the original Oblivion per attribute per level, with the exclusion of luck, and you can sort of just assign those. You can't do more than 3, which was the limit in Oblivion as well, and the catch is luck in particular actually costs 4 virtues, because you could only level that up 1 point at a time in the original as well, which is the limit here, and I think they wanted to, as a result of that, make it cost more to level it up, so you kind of get that same effect. So in some ways, not only are you kind of leveling up faster than you were in the original because of the fact that all of the skills are contributing to it, and you don't necessarily have to pre-plan it out a little too much in order to make sure you get the best level ups possible for your attributes, which was the busted part. There is also the fact that they definitely seem to have adjusted enemy scaling for sure. Now on your end, it looks like they altered the method by which you gain health. So you would gain health from the endurance stats based on how much you had when you leveled up, and then as you gained more endurance, it would not apply retroactively, which meant that you had to basically max out endurance quickly if you wanted to not be a glass cannon by the end of the game when everything was very strong. And on top of that, though, enemies don't seem to be ramping up as quickly as I have noticed previously. For instance, the character I'm playing right now is approaching level 10, and I'm still actually fighting mostly lower level tiers of enemies. And by the way, just as an aside, I assume somebody's probably going to make this mistake when they're playing. In the early levels of the game, when you start tackling the Oblivion gates, when you kill the Dremora in there, or the Daedra guys, they're going to drop a type of gear called Dremora gear, which is identical visually to Daedric, the higher tier. But the thing is, the Dremora gear has terrible stats because it is functionally a different set. The Dremora gear is just there for you to find because it wouldn't make sense for these guys to drop nothing until you get to the point where they'll be dropping Daedric. But speaking of Oblivion gates, of all of the visual improvements this game makes, by far and away, my favorite is the actual Oblivion gates themselves, alongside the Deadlands, the area of Oblivion that we go into when we step into the gates. That stuff just looks phenomenal. I love it. But one thing you're going to do a lot of in those Oblivion gates is combat, so we might as well talk about that. So some changes here immediately, the addition of a sprint button as an example, but also the addition of things like hit reactions for starters. In fact, if you watch my retrospective of the original version of Oblivion, I believe my exact words were, combat sometimes feels like you're hitting things with a wet noodle because they just don't react to anything you're doing and you're kind of just flailing your arm around. And while I would not go so far as to say that the remastered version here has like incredible combat or anything, it's still definitely on the floatier side, which I imagine is due to how they made the remaster, but it does immediately feel a lot better than that original versions, even if I still don't think it would hold up to something of today's standards though. The key thing to keep in mind combat-wise would probably just be all the small improvements they made to make it feel better like those hit reactions, because the big stuff remains largely the same. You know, you can't equip things in each hand. You can't really dual wield, you can't equip like magic in one hand because magic has its own assigned button. So you equip whatever it is you have, and then you have a sort of magic spell equipped to whatever your spell equipment slot happens to be, if that makes sense. Now, before I start wrapping this video up, to sort of give a note on performance and then just kind of end it, because I will sit here and talk forever if I get the chance, which is what the review is going to be for. But on the performance side of things, Unreal Engine 5 comes with a few performance hiccups that I would say are pretty well known, a little bit of stuttering, the occasional freezing, things like that that has to do with how it loads in shaders. Some of that is definitely present. That is pretty much the extent of what I ran into personally. I have seen already, though, from reviews over on the Steam page, as an example, that other people are experiencing more serious technical problems, such as frequent crashing, etc. So that might be something to look into if you're still looking to buy this for yourself, I suppose. But all of that combined with the fact that they kept the price at $50, which was a bit of a surprise to me. I was honestly fully expecting them to go for $70 with this. Glad to see they reined that in. The $50 base price does come with the DLCs, and the deluxe version comes with the soundtrack, the art book, and then a couple of like extra cosmetic skin type stuff. But I think realistically the art book and the soundtrack would be the big sellers for the deluxe edition. And that's where we're going to start wrapping this up. But I do want to, as a last little thing here, say that I am clearly very excited to play this. I was very much so looking forward to it, especially after having been a realist that I didn't know whether the leaks would be real or anything like that, obviously. But in spite of that excitement, I do ultimately have a job to do, which is to review games. And as much as I love Oblivion and as much as it means to me to be able to make new memories with a different version of it, I do still absolutely plan to go through this thing and look at it with a critical eye and see if there are any glaring issues or problems. But right here as a first impressions video, it really does feel like they managed to thread an impossibly small needle here. The fact that this looks so much better, has all these improved systems, but still feels like Oblivion is really the most remarkable thing about it to me, which is exactly what my first impressions are. So hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. I will have the review out here before too long. I know Oblivion like the back of my hand, so it's really just not going to take that much time. And in the meantime, if you want to see anything else, by all means drop a suggestion down below. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.